Hello and welcome to this episode of Unscripted. I am now joined by Vanessa Lovatt, who Vanessa and I met. Where did we meet? We met on a panel, didn't we?
We
That's a
did. We
strange
met
place to meet.
on a stage.
Yeah. So we met on a stage on a panel, and we had a really good discussion about event tech and so on. What was really great about that discussion is we didn't always agree.
Yes, we
So
did.
that's so that's
Disagree.
amazing. Yeah. So that always makes for a nice conversation, and you get different perspectives on the
Yeah.
same issue, which I think is way more helpful. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted you on this podcast, so we could
Well, I'll
carry
try and
on that.
disagree with you again then.
Yeah, you must. You have to. That's your job. So, Vanessa, you've been working in B2B events probably as long as
For
I
a long
have.
19 years of conferencing and everything, I would say, from small dinners through to a few thousand people coming along to a festival. Lots of digital activity as well. I ran the first digital event with the business I was working with at the time in 2012. There was a team of 4 of us, and we had this slightly renegade idea to just try and take a very successful event online. And at the time, it was pretty unconventional. And if I think about the technology that we used, I actually cringe. It was so rudimentary and probably not a great attendee experience, but they stuck with us. And that was my first foray into the world of online B2B media as well. And I loved it, I have to say. So I've ended up with a really good blend of in-person and digital experience, which I feel very fortunate to have had.
Well, you fall into a very unique bracket because not everybody has that.
True.
And you're right. Yeah.
There was a moment explaining that I worked in conferences, but I never actually went to conferences because they were all online. And this would probably have been around, I guess, 2018, 2019 timeframe, and people just sort of scratching their heads saying, I don't understand.
We'll come on to that because online conferencing is very vibrant. I was watching yesterday an online conference from Google about startups and AI and everything. And there's some really cool stuff that's going on. But anyway, we digress. So when we were preparing for this podcast, one of the things that we wanted to talk about, we've got 3 things that we want to talk about, is I'd like you to talk a little bit about this current view and relationship between technology and its application to live events.
Yeah.
And I kind of always say, hey, the relationship is broken.
Yeah.
But you've got a slightly different view. So,
well, I'm sure at some point you'll be wanting me to stop talking, but I have such a deep love of event tech, and I don't know where it came from because I have a very traditional events background. I suppose until I made that deviation into the digital side of events, perhaps a little earlier than many others did. And I see tech as this incredible enabler of the sector in so many different regards, everything from sales and marketing through to the actual delivery of the events themselves. And I know traditionally when we talk about event tech, people tend to err more towards, I would say immediately, event apps would be the first thing that spring to mind for people. And then they might think about registration, or they might not even think of that as event tech. And then they might think of virtual platforms. Who knows what order they might go in. But what I don't think we've yet got to, so where perhaps this is why you say the relationship is broken, is I don't think we've got to the point where tech is viewed as a sort of essential foundational block when you're building an event from scratch. I'm very aware that people are still leaving their event tech investigations and planning really late in the event planning cycle. So even just this week, I spoke with an incredibly talented event owner who set up their first event that they ran independently. They'd worked in events for a long time, but launched their own thing, I think about 4, maybe 5 years ago. And she was very honest and said, we still leave all of our event tech planning to the last minute. We're so busy thinking about all of the other aspects that we're comfortable with that we just don't give ourselves enough time to pick the right solutions and tools for us, and then actually really get them adopted and implemented to the maximum of their capability. And I think that is very representative for an awful lot of other people. The other end of the spectrum, you've got organizations who've got tech in their system that they perhaps adopted a few years ago. Maybe it was during 2020 when times were very challenging and solutions had to be implemented very often at breakneck speed. And they're still working with those solutions because change in their organization is just too hard for maybe good reasons, maybe for not good reasons, depending on the organization. And so I think in those instances, you've got very incumbent systems that perhaps the organizers that are using them don't feel it's a great fit anymore, but they just have no choice. And so in that instance, the relationship is broken in that it's an arranged marriage, I suppose you could say. They don't have any choice in the matter.
And I think that is what you're describing. I mean, look, I see it too, so let's not spend too much time agreeing. Let's spend more time perhaps unpicking why it exists in the first place. Because one of the things that you pointed out about this founder who started 4 years ago and saying tech is the last thing is what I kind of call it the logistics bias. Mm-hmm. A lot about putting in place in-person events. A lot of it, the most visible part of it is what you do in terms of the logistics, how it looks, how it feels. And I think people in the digital world forget how visible this product is. Mm-hmm. If you have an online store and someone buys a shoe and, your shipping kind of goes a bit wrong, whatever, it's one person, right? And you can kind of fix it at scale and you can keep going. With a live event, even when I was organizing events, I remember all the times when I used to stand at the corner of Olympia watching the trains go in with, anxiety because this product is so visible. So much energy goes into the logistics.
Yeah.
And that's where the comfort zone lies.
Yes.
And the experience lies. And then there's this fear of tech. Yeah. And I think fear is the wrong word because I find that most technologists don't understand the fear of not fear. Fear is again the wrong word, but the impact on logistics, right? It's got to be right. And technology is almost handed off to someone. Hey, we need something to do this. Can so-and-so do it? But there is no inherent business analysis, BA or whatever, so that the tech doesn't just come in to solve the question that's been asked to solve, but it comes in and does way more, right? And wows people and say, hey, you asked us to solve this question, but we can now do that. And people are like, oh my God, that's amazing because you've saved me a ton of time.
Yeah. So I have lots of thoughts. I'm trying to scribble down my thoughts, but I can't write fast enough.
Yeah, that wasn't a very well-structured question, I have to say.
So firstly, your logistics bias. I 100% agree with you on this. Sorry, I'm agreeing with you. I apologize. I promise I'll try and disagree with you soon.
You've got a bit of time left to disagree with me.
But I think this is also the nature, the gap we have that means we have this logistics bias, and I'm doing the inverted commas sign, you can't see me, but the fear of technology. It's the way that events have developed and evolved over the last how many decades that these sorts of professional B2B events, because that's what we're talking about today, have really come into existence. And it is, the success metrics so often are about what logistically happens on the day. And when I run post-event debriefs, I'm quite militant these days in that we do a logistics debrief and then separately we do a commercial debrief, because I find too often that a single debrief from an event becomes monopolized by the logistical elements because they're so pertinent in one's mind at that moment. They feel so acute when things go wrong logistically that they dominate. And actually, the commercials for me is really where 90% of that debrief should be taking place. That's not suggest the logistics are not important, but they are fundamentally two different elements of the event.
You should add a third debrief to that. It's the participant debrief.
Yeah,
A debrief that is entirely focused on the people who attend.
Links into something so similar, which I feel why we have this gap. And I'm trying to think of an analogy. I can't think of a good one off the top of my head, but the event technology provides, well, let me change this slightly. You have lots of different sorts of event technology, which we're not going to go into the details and depth of that now. But the vast majority of it is something that will touch the attendee experience somehow, the vast majority of it. So let's assume we're talking about event technology that touches the attendee experience. The event technology companies sell their solution to event organizers or marketers or the person who buys the solution, but they are very often, again, the vast majority of the time, not the actual end users of the solution. And so when the event technology organizations are doing their research with their customers, actually, a lot of that research should be with their customers' customers. So if we go with event apps, I'm hearing quite a lot of reasonably negative chat about event apps at the moment, which, as I said, I love event tech, so it makes me sad, but I do sort of get it, because the event apps seem to exist to serve the organizers' needs often more than they actually exist to serve the attendees' needs. So attendees,
100%.
even at events for events people, we are the attendee and we get the experience that there's a lot of different parts of the app to complete, and the profile form I need to fill in, all these different elements that our attendees actually experience on a daily basis when they're coming to our events or on an event by event basis. And so I think that's the other reason that we have this, to use your phrase, slightly broken relationship, that the event technology organizations, no matter how brilliant they are, they really need to be talking to customers to get that true attendee outcome. And there are definitely some that do this. So please don't mishear me. I am very aware that there are some that do this, but it's not easy. So a lot of them don't do that as often as probably they would like to. I don't think there's a lack of desire to do this. It's just how you actually do it. So yes, you're right. There should be a third debrief that is just about the attendee experience, and actually get some attendees in the room with you or online with you and ask them in person. And then it's our job as users of the event technology to go and find the right technology to meet their needs. We shouldn't expect them to tell us that. And then all of this is hard, Adam. This is really, really bloody hard. And it's also the sort of gap I see again. And I think this is the nature of events and how they've grown and how they've developed. And I would also say, I do think there is more focus on this changing, that typically in events in the past, it's been an industry where perhaps the more extroverted characters have been able to thrive. And this is brilliantly being addressed through many enriching conversations across the industry to help bring the characters that are a little bit more introverted into the world of events, both as a successful organizer, but also from an attendee perspective. But where I think this affects the tech is that we had an amazing workforce of people who loved talking to people, socializing with people, having conversations with people, tapping into people's brains. And then suddenly, 4 years ago, we forced all of those amazing people to sit behind a screen and suddenly become experts in technology. And that's uncomfortable. It's painful. I remember a really wonderful, she was head of operations for a business I was working with at the time. And she was really honest about 2 months in. I'm not going to, we all know what happened in 2020, but about 2 months in, she just said, I hate this. I absolutely hate this with every fiber of my being. So I do think we've still got this hangover of that very, very negative association when technology was just forced on us. And it wasn't a choice.
Oh, yeah, look, 100%. And the tech companies probably didn't help or do any favors because, for various other reasons. And it's so hard when your competency is what you've just described in talking to people. If that is your competency, to then suddenly go, hey, here's some tech you now need to implement. You've never done it before. Go ahead, but just crack on. And there's all sorts of other nuances that you and I know about that you then need to think about. It's almost like someone who's studied to be an architect is now being asked to be a psychologist, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The gap is that big.
So I think that's another reason that we have this challenge. Last piece I think I'll add in, I could go on this one all day, but last bit I'll add in is ownership within an organization. Wonderfully, there are a very small number of actual event technology positions emerging in larger organizations. So I've seen these in Bloomberg, EY, for example, where you have someone who is, that's their job title, they are head of event technology. That is not commonplace across the business, though. So if I go down to a much more perhaps typical size organization, typical size events business, somebody's trying to do this alongside their day job as well. And that, again, is very hard. And very often you haven't got somebody in an events organization whose sole role is to work out the right technology options. So you may have a few different people and they've probably all got slightly different objectives. You might have someone in marketing or a couple of people in marketing. You might have somebody in delegate acquisition, somebody in content, somebody in operations, and collectively they're all doing their best. But actually, the operations and logistics person has a slightly different driver to the marketing person, who's got a different driver to a sort of content person. So again, it makes it really difficult to then develop a very commercial and ROI-driven technology strategy. Thank you. And that, again, it comes with a lot of challenges getting this balance right. Many of us, I think, are starting to embrace, or continuing perhaps to embrace more and more, is there is no one-size-fits-all technology solution in this sector, in my opinion, nor should there be. There's certainly some solutions that offer many different features within them that can help you with an awful lot of different things, but there simply isn't something that does everything. And therefore, when people are looking for a single solution that they might be able to get some value from in both logistics and marketing and content, they end up kind of putting square pegs in round holes.
It always ends up being a trade-off, right? It always ends up being a negotiation between the functions. No one ends up being happy because nothing's quite fitting.
Really happy.
Yeah, and usually the person who is happy is the one who shouts the loudest or has got the most senior position because they've got what they want, right? And that is what happens.
But really, so it's so hard as well for the reason you said, that when you're assessing technology solutions, either ones that you already have or ones that you're considering either adding to your tech stack or replacing something in your tech stack, that so often you'll get distracted along the way through with, oh, and they do that and that and that as well. And oh, maybe we could then go and do A, B, and C, whereas actually you were originally trying to set out to do X, Y, and Z. And creating that correct business case for the technology applications is so important. But again, it's hard to stay laser focused. The solutions are constantly evolving. No complaints on that. That's a full thumbs up. Brilliant. Excellent. Please keep doing that, technology providers. We love you for it. But it makes it hard to keep up. And just, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, a team I was working with, and they said, we use this solution, but we've just realized we've missed a load of feature releases. We had no idea that these were even available to us. And then there's that slight sense, I guess, of not a broken relationship, but a bit of disappointment that they didn't realize what they could have been using.
I think that's the appetite of innovation, right? That's the appetite for innovation. Because when you go back to that logistics bias and that way of thinking, there is, because there's such a heavy cost involved, the logistics side of things, you are really rigorous and you set one way. And that, I feel, becomes pervasive within the thinking of the sector. But if you're in the digital world, I mean, okay, not everybody is as crazy as me. I'll take the next new thing, play around with it, maximize it. Right. What you've called out is there should be every feature release from a platform to go into a triaging process of saying, is this useful, not useful? And then you keep evolving. And the same thing with event tech, because a lot of people I talk to who are sort of event tech people, they're constantly implementing a new thing. And the big frustration is we're never properly on the table around how it adds business value.
Now,
it's just an implementation exercise, strategy.
This same founder said she knows full well that they leave event tech planning too late in their cycle. She also said that she sees too often, and she said that they have done it, but they're getting better at it now, where something didn't work immediately, so they'd swap for a different solution the following year. And actually, she's really come to realize that is the completely wrong way to approach things, and actually accepting that things aren't going to be perfect the first time, and then evolving and iterating and developing a partnership with that technology provider is a much, much more sustainable way to really get the most out of your event tech. And this, I shared this with her in return, which might be interesting for some listeners. I think it was around 2021-ish. There was a very strong move from not all, but many event technology providers to move to an annual licensing model as opposed to an event by event licensing model. And I think the pendulum swung back a little bit on this now, and some will do a little bit of both. The reason for this, because I was event technology at that time, I was supplier side, is that we saw so many people acquiring technology,
swapping it out.
And so, of course, they were never going to get the most out of it because there was no reason for them to invest the time in getting under the skin of the solution. And actually, it was pretty unpopular, but moving to the annual licensing meant people made better purchases because they were taking the purchase much more seriously because they were stuck with it, inverted commas again. And so they made better purchases, but also they spent a lot more time in adopting the solution properly. And this is what that founder also said. She said the adoption is the biggest challenge, because you can buy the best thing in the world, but if you don't implement it well, disaster, frankly.
And it's not just that. If you don't level up the skills in the team to maximize it, if you suddenly go from a email sending platform to a AI-driven email platform, very different approach, right?
Completely different approach.
Sorry,
and you've got no, you're absolutely right. And it's representative of the vast majority, if not all, technology solutions. And so, yes, if you're listening and you hate annual licensing pricing, I understand why, but at the same time, it does very often drive much, much better adoption and much better results. So that's the silver lining to annual pricing, I suppose.
And I think also, what is heartening in a way is some event technologists rather, not the technology providers themselves, I can see it from their point of view, are starting to move into much more of what I call like a ecosystem of best in breed, and then putting it in, but making sure that you can then, so if you have a webinar platform, you get the best one that you can afford for your fit, but it just solves that problem. The webinar platform isn't your email system. It's not your, all of that, which is what makes it very hard to extract yourself from a platform and adopt something new. And you can see it from the tech provider's point of view, right? There's so many systems where I've gone in and I'm like going, oh, hang on a minute. So this is your reg system. And then you're sending emails from this, but you're also sending emails from here. And then that's doing that. And it's a mess. It's an absolute mess.
Well, you've made me think of another point, actually. I think that means sometimes the relationship can feel broken, and that's around data. Well, we didn't actually talk about data at all when we had the
because if you start talking about data, you wouldn't get a word in edgeways with me.
And it's Friday, and maybe we should cut ourselves some slack. Data sitting in multiple systems, not talking to each other. I mean, for me right now, this is a real challenge, and it's a massive frustration, and it's a growth opportunity it's hard to harness. So I think that also can lead to quite a bit of frustration. Very often it's not the technology company's problem, not the technology company's fault at all whatsoever, but sometimes there's, I guess, a negative association with that. And the other, when you're trying to run all these different systems together, it can feel really overwhelming. And we're talking about folks who were not in their natural habitat in the technology world 5 years ago and still making it a more natural habitat. And it's much more enjoyable to go and work on things that you are familiar with and know. And that's just human nature.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And, you're right. We must cut everybody a lot of slack, because what you're describing is something what we do with our clients, where we try and have a data agnostic approach to everything, that there is a place where all the data sits, but no one system owns the data, which makes it easier to swap things out. And I say these things like it's easy, but getting to that place is actually quite hard. And you start talking a different language. You start saying things, oh, we're going to have a data lake. And people are going, oh my God, what's that? Sounds complicated. It's not, right? But you need one of those. And then you say things like, oh, and then we'll have a real-time API sync with the blah, 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 blah system. And they're like going, oh, Jesus, this is another thing that can break. But I think what we're really bad at is articulating the benefit of moving to that environment where you can hot swap some of these endpoint solutions.
Yep.
And also a little bit like with the event tech, where people are meeting each other, the signal of, hey, Adam has connected with Vanessa and they had a meeting at the event is just lost. It's like somewhere else, but that's such a powerful signal. It should be in your data lake.
Yeah, I agree with you. What I will say though is the ability to really make those data connections happen can be very accessible in certain scales of organizations. When you do get into the large organizations, it is a bit like wading through treacle. And that doesn't mean they can't be done, just to be clear. It's never a case of can't. It's all around priorities and trade-offs with what might not happen in exchange and so on and so forth. But I think I was trying to think of an analogy of what implementing an event tech stack from scratch or reviving and renewing and evolving an existing event tech stack. And the analogy I came up with was, imagine that you have implemented in your own home. So sorry, work aside, you're in your own home and you've set up a full smart home system. So your heating's on it, your electricity's on it, your lighting's on it. There's probably your music's on it. I'm sure there's something else that you could put on it that I just personally don't know.
Curtains, blinds.
Oh yes. I mean, let's go there, right? But you wouldn't walk into your home on day one of that all being implemented. Well, firstly, you wouldn't implement it all in one day. You'd implement it gradually. But as you were implementing it, you wouldn't expect to get it right on the first day. And you wouldn't expect to know how to get your heating synced up with your phone and your phone synced up with your lighting so that everything turns on at the right time. You would expect this to take a while to work out. And then you'd wake up in the middle of the night one day sweating because you'd got the heating coming on in the middle of the night and it wasn't what you meant. If you're trying to think about it in your own world as something that you can identify with a little bit more, it just occurred to me as a very silly, but probably kind of accurate analogy of what it's like trying to put all of these different systems together. I only have my heating on my phone and I struggle with that enough, quite honestly.
And look, I think looking at the time on that analogy, we will leave it. That analogy tees up probably a future podcast, which I think will be awesome. But for now, we've covered a lot. Vanessa, thank you very much for joining me on this podcast. I hope you find these valuable. Thank you.
Thanks.